My story happened years ago, when my son Ben was only 5. As with any kid, he was becoming obsessed with the entire lore of Santa Claus. Flying reindeer, a factory full of elves, naughty and nice lists, everything. When I had to pick up a few last-minute gifts at the mall the week before Christmas, I bribed Ben with a visit to the mall Santa Claus to get him to behave while shopping. I'd tell him, "Ben, you know Santa's watching, so you have to be good while we wait in line to get rung up." Works like a charm. Truly genius stuff by whoever came up with the whole naughty and nice list thing. Anyway, Ben behaved, and after the shopping was done, we got in line for the Santa Claus pictures. The exhibit was set up in the center of the mall. As we came down the escalator, we were greeted by a massive Christmas tree, a Christmas village set, and even teenage employees dressed up as Santa's helpers. In the center of the whole spectacle was Santa himself, larger than life on a massive throne, wearing a red suit and black boots. Ben's face lit up with excitement, and we quickly got in line. When it was Ben's turn, he excitedly ran to Santa and climbed into his lap. After listing off a few toys and reassuring the mall Santa that he had been a good boy that year, I heard him ask Santa to visit the North Pole to see his workshop. I chuckled and told Ben that Santa was very busy, and it was too late to visit the North Pole tonight. I told him that we might have time after the Christmas rush. The mall Santa turned his head towards mine, and with a gravelly voice, said, "But he's been such a good boy this year. Maybe I should take him with me for a little while." His face was plastered with a creepy grin, but his eyes pierced into mine and shook me to the core. They were dead and expressionless, and they were staring into my soul. "What do you say, Ben? Do you want to go to the North Pole?" he asked in a monotone voice. Although he was speaking to Ben, he didn't break his stare or blink as he said this, and his eyes were still locked into mine. I shuddered and froze for a second. I've never been so uncomfortable because of the way someone looked at me. When I finally snapped back, I told Ben it was time to go because Santa was very busy. I tugged Ben off Santa's lap, probably a bit too hard, and I told the teenage girl working the photo stand that we didn't need photos. I was seriously creeped out by this guy, and just wanted to get back to the car and get out of there. We took the escalator back up, and when I took one last look over the railing towards the Santa setup, our eyes locked again. He had another child on his lap, but he was staring across the mall right up at me. He grinned his evil grin, and then shifted his gaze towards Ben. Santa waved, and before I could react, Ben was waving back enthusiastically. This filled me with dread, and the knot in the pit of my stomach tightened. I instinctually grabbed Ben and hightailed it back to the car. I was a little bit disturbed by the whole situation, and thought about making a complaint to the mall's management, but I figured that the whole thing was over now. Besides, the mall Santa didn't really do anything. Maybe I was just overreacting. Later that night I put Ben to bed, and still a little jumpy about the whole thing, I took our dog Jasper out for his nightly walk. There was fresh white snow blanketing the ground, and snow-dusted evergreen trees lined the edge of our lot where it met the woods. The scene would have been beautiful, but unfortunately my nerves were shot, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Being far off the road, the only light in the yard came from the lights on either side of the front door. Darkness shrouded the ends of the property, and I couldn't shake the feeling that anyone or anything could be just outside the illumination of the meager house lights, watching through the darkness. I'm not sure if it was the cold or the thought of that mall Santa's soulless stare, but I was shivering. Jasper was sniffing the air and tugging on his leash towards a bed of shrubs. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about the mall Santa peering at me through the darkness. That was just paranoid talk, and I put it out of mind. We have all sorts of animals on the property, including a stray cat or two, and Jasper was always sniffing out something to chase. He had quite the prey drive, and if he caught sight of a squirrel, I'd never get him inside. So I dragged him back in and shut the door to the cold night air. I wrapped a few presents and tried to unwind by the fire, and with the help of a glass of wine, I managed to doze off on the couch. I don't know how long I was asleep before I was awakened by Jasper's barking, but the fire in the fireplace had been reduced to embers. A chill filled the room. Jasper was growling and frantically clawing at Ben's bedroom door. I let out a primal shriek and screamed for Ben as I ran down the hall and threw open the door. Ben was sitting up in bed. He looked safe and sound, but the window was wide open. The wind howled, and the curtains billowed in the freezing air. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw he was okay. "Ben, it's freezing in here. Why would you open a window? Are you crazy?" I walked over and slammed the window shut. "It wasn't me, Mom. It was Santa. He came to take me to the North Pole, but Jasper scared him away." My heart jumped and the knot in my stomach was back. Looking around the room, I saw the red fur-lined Santa hat crumpled at the foot of the bed. In horror, I glanced out the window. Illuminated by the moon were a set of large boot tracks tracing across the lawn into the darkness beyond the tree line. Growing up, I never went Christmas tree shopping. We had a fake tree from the 90s that sat in our basement, only to come out for an elaborate assembly ritual each year. Sorting through the 100+ plastic branches took hours, but it was something we were supposed to be grateful for. Just be glad you're not out in the freezing weather, or trying to haul a 50-pound tree up onto the roof of the car, my mom would say. When I moved into a place of my own, though, I decided to put an end to this nonsense. We're going to get a real tree this year, I told my boyfriend Robert. We only had a 600-square-foot apartment, but I was determined. We'd get a tiny, skinny little thing to rival Charlie Brown's if we had to. So one December evening, we went over to the local farm to choose our tree. I'd never been Christmas tree shopping before, but as soon as we arrived, I knew I'd love it. Pre-cut trees were lined up in rows, each held upright by its own stand, spaced so close together on the grass that they formed a dense forest. Edison light bulbs hung overhead, casting a warm golden glow. The weather was weird that evening, unseasonably warm and foggy, and the way the light dispersed through the fog, silhouetting the trees, looked like a shot from a Hallmark movie. "This is so cool," I whispered to Robert. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to the end of the field. There was a large plastic roll of something, and standing next to it, a man. He looked very fitting here, with his flannel shirt and lumberjack beard. Robert explained that the netting was used to keep all the branches in for easy transport. I took him by the arm. "Let's go find our tree." We started down one of the narrow aisles. The air smelled like pine, like that one candle Mom always burned around Christmas time. Robert tried to match my enthusiasm, but eventually seemed bored, lagging behind me as I ran through the place like an excited little girl. I finally stopped in front of a particularly beautiful tree. Its branches were thick and lush, and the fragrance of pine was strong, filling my nose. Slowly, I reached out to touch it. The needles were surprisingly soft and pliable under my fingers, nothing like the shiny plastic ones I've seen all my life. "Robert, come here, I think I found..." I stopped. Robert wasn't behind me. "Robert?" I glanced around, but all I saw were the pine trees. Rows and rows of them, like a thick forest all around me. The light bulbs buzzed above my head, their soft golden glow dispersing into the thick fog. But my sense of direction must have been messed up, because when I rounded the corner, there were just more trees. I pulled out my phone to call them, and that's when I heard the footsteps. Oh, thank goodness. I whipped around, trying to pinpoint the source. And then I saw it, a flash of motion between the trees. It wasn't Robert. It was the lumberjack guy that I'd seen standing next to the netting. He was in the next aisle over, slowly, methodically walking through the grass, as if looking for something. Maybe I can ask him if he saw Robert. I hurried down the aisle until I was several feet behind him, running parallel. I sucked in a breath, and stopped dead. Something was swinging from his hand, something heavy, glinting gold in the light strung above our heads. An axe. I stood frozen, watching him, until after he turned the corner and disappeared among the trees. Of course he would have an axe. That's how they cut down the trees, right? Never mind that these trees had already been cut down. Maybe he needed to, I don't know, trim them or something. Maybe. A scream echoed out on the other end of the field. My heart plummeted. Instinctually, I lurched forward to run towards the scream to see if it was Robert, except I couldn't. I looked down to see that the belt loop in my jeans was snagged on one of the needly branches. I quickly reached down and unhooked it from my pants. Then I took off running down the aisle. But the aisle seemed so much narrower than before. I couldn't run that fast, with the branches reaching in from both sides, clawing at my legs. A corner lay up ahead, and as I came to it, I prayed I'd see the parking lot at the other end, with Robert waiting for me. I didn't. Ahead of me there were more trees, like I was stuck in some sort of Christmas tree maze, like they were rearranging themselves to block off all the exits, and the aisle was impossibly narrow now. I had to stop running so that I wouldn't trip over the branches extending into the path. The progress was slow, but I kept going, leaping over branches, needle scratching at my face, snagging on my jacket. And then I heard a sound. It was coming off to my right, a sort of rolling sound, like a something round being turned over and over. I ran over to the impossibly thick tangle of tree branches and peered out. More trees, but beyond them, I could see the checkout station, with the roll of netting for packing the trees. The lumberjack man was standing there, packing something. It wasn't a tree. I pushed myself through the hedge. The branches stabbed at me, scraping so hard against my arms that they drew blood. And then, finally, I popped out on the other side. If the checkout station was there, I knew the parking lot was to the left, so I kept going, pushing myself through the tangled web of branches until I was bloody and bruised on the other side. I locked myself in the car, and then I called 911. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone, and Robert. Both had disappeared, and the patch of Christmas trees looked as magical as it did when we arrived. The police have been searching for Robert for the past 5 days. Nothing has come up. No evidence, no clues, no body. I know in my heart that he isn't with us anymore. His family is still holding on to hope, but I know what happened to him that day. But sometimes, I wonder if there's a reason we haven't found his body yet. Maybe he was put into that netting for a reason. Maybe that farm doesn't only sell trees.